Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this month. I'm going to give a few seconds for everyone to join the call, but yeah, thank you also to those of you who joined us last month. We had a really great Uptycs live session on container security. So if you're interested at all in container security and some of the solutions here at Uptycs, I really encourage you to check that out. It's free, it's ungated, it's online the Uptycs website, so definitely check that out. But this month we have a really exciting session, and I'm really excited to introduce my two co-hosts to you. We're going to be talking about MITRE ATT&CK, the recent MITRE ATT&CK evaluations, what it means to us, what it means to you. Let's get into it all. But before we get into it all, I'm really excited to introduce Tyson, the Director of Product Marketing here, and Amit, the Head of Threat Intelligence and Research. Why don't you guys take a moment and introduce yourself? Tyson, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Tyson Supasade, Director of Product Marketing, as you mentioned. I'm excited for today's webinar for two reasons. One is my first time to be on Uptycs Live. Hopefully, Jeremy, you'll invite me back. And then the second reason is we get to talk about the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is super interesting. And I just love to talk about it with people. I think it's super valuable.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tyson. Amit, you want to take a moment?
Hey, hi, everyone. My name is Amit Malik. I lead the threat research and intelligence team at Uptycs. And we do pretty much everything about threats, MITRE ATT&CK framework, and threat intelligence.
Thank you guys both so much. You guys have so much interesting things that you do here on a day-to-day basis, and I'm really excited for you guys to kind of share that with our audience and get to evangelize a bit about the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So we have a really exciting session today and a lot to cover. So I'll quickly go over this agenda slide. A few housekeeping items. This webinar is expected to go around 35 to 40 minutes. We just finished those introductions, so thank you, Amit and Tyson. So to start, Tyson will give an overview of the MITRE ATT&CK framework and the evaluation process. Then I'll give a deeper dive into this year's focus on the ransomware and wiper malware threat groups, Wizard Spider and Sandworm. Then at the next stage, we'll get into the really fun stuff with the Uptycs solution walkthrough led by Amit. And then we left time at the end for an open Q&A. But of course, please ask questions along the way, and we'll keep an eye on that questions box. Tyson, you want to take it away?
Yeah. Thank you very much. So just to level set, the MITRE ATT&CK framework was introduced, I believe, in around 2015 timeframe. And what it did is it really introduced a new level of standardization and rigor around describing attack behavior. Before the attack framework, we had things like the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain and things that would very generally describe attack behavior, but MITRE ATT&CK was the first one to get very nitty gritty. And the cool thing is that they're always updating it, and they're updating it with actual observations from the field. So if you dig in, you'll see the credits and annotations and sources for the behaviors and software that they're observing. And what the attack evaluations are is what MITRE invites vendors to come and participate in the evaluations. They tell them up beforehand, we are going to evaluate the efficacy of your product in detecting the behavior of this APT group or these two APT groups. So every year is its own unique beast. That's why it's not really like an annual progression thing, or because each year it's its own animal, really. So for example, last year they looked at Carbonok and Fin7 APT groups, and those organizations are targeting retail and financial services industry. This year it's really exciting because they're looking at Wizard Spider and Sandworm, which do ransomware and wiper malware, and they are very non-discriminatory about which industry you're in. They don't focus on any particular industry. They just target, are you using computers, and they'll go after you. So this year's evaluation is going to be of high interest to pretty much everybody. The way that you should use this as a customer, the attack evaluations, is first, you need to be evaluating your detection coverage just against the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and using the MITRE ATT&CK framework to identify gaps in your detection coverage. And certain types of gaps are going to be more important than others, because you're going to need to do some threat profiling, like who is going after you, which types of APT groups are representative of the attackers that would most likely be targeting your organization. MITRE ATT&CK has the behaviors, the TTPs for those threat groups documented, and then you need to go in and just see where the gaps are, where you need to improve. And then that's where the evaluations come in. So when you're starting to look and consider how you can cover those gaps, you can use the evaluations to say that, okay, I care about, Carbanock, for example. So I would want to go look at the evaluation for last year and see which vendors, how they performed against the Carbanock threat group, and then map those results to the detection gaps that you have covered. And MITRE actually provides tools, online tools, to help you to do this mapping. So that's the way that I think it's the most clear-cut way of how you would use the attack evaluations. Next slide, please. So getting to this year's evaluation, it's focusing on the data encrypted for impact tactic. So this is a relatively new tactic added to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Before, it was things like, actions on objectives would be like exfiltration and so, but then they realized, oh, no, actually some groups are just, they're looking to encrypt your data, either to hold it hostage for ransom, or they're looking just to not allow you to access it anymore. It's a destructive attack. So for this evaluation round, they chose Wizard Spider and Sandworm to be the representative groups in this evaluation. And what you see here in this diagram, it's not meant, this is actually available on the MITRE Ingenuity website. We're looking at the technique scope for this year's enterprise evaluation. And this is the entire enterprise attack framework. All of the things that are techniques that are in white are ones that are not covered in this year's evaluation. The ones that are in purple are the ones that are unique to Wizard Spider. The ones that are in blue are unique to Sandworm, and the ones that are in dark gray are covered by both Wizard Spider and Sandworm. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is just to emphasize again, like I said, each year's evaluation is unique. Trying to make sense of like, well, what's one year versus another is like really comparing apples to oranges. Each year is its own unique beast based on the different APT groups that they're evaluating. One last thing that I would like to mention about the attack evaluations is that, at least in the last 2 years, I don't know about earlier, but in the last 2 years, MITRE has added an optional Linux component to the evaluations. And Uptycs has definitely participated in the Linux component of the evaluation. But it's important to note that the rest of the evaluation is based on Windows environments. So with the addition of the Linux component, MITRE is recognizing that multi-platform detection coverage is increasingly important. And it also means that if you're like a Mac and Linux shop, then the evaluations largely are not going to be as relevant to you. So hopefully in the future, there's going to be more evaluations like on the Mac side and for different platforms or crossing different platforms, because attackers really don't care, which OS they're attacking. They're going to go after any target. So that's what I have to say about the framework and the evaluations. I'll hand it back to you, Jeremy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tyson. I think you did a great job kind of setting the stage for some of the background to just what exactly MITRE ATT&CK was born out of and how it's used. And I think it's a really good point that you're making about kind of mapping internal gaps to coverage areas. And we'll get into that more in a bit. But I do want to have some exciting stuff to talk about here with the two APT groups that Tyson mentioned. So as we mentioned, this year's MITRE eval is focused on the two groups, and one is Wizard Spider. So Wizard Spider is a profit-oriented APT criminal group based out of Russia and Eastern Europe. So what actually does profit-oriented mean? Profit-oriented means that they run ransomware campaigns and they want to extract ransom and maximize the profit they can get from targets and the number of systems that they exploit. So they're pretty industry agnostic, but you may also recognize them from TrickBot. So TrickBot is a malware for Windows that exploits access techniques to enter and proliferate across targeted systems. So you can start to see their evolution as like a threat group. Let's give like an example here with, TrickBot can be combined with the Ryuk ransomware to first enter a target system using TrickBot. And then they use the Ryuk ransomware to hold that system and data hostage, extract that ransom, and just make a killing. So this all clearly then ties into this year's MITRE evals through that data encrypted for impact technique, among other techniques and tactics that Amit will dive into in a bit. Essentially what they're using here is they're using their ransomware to hold companies and government agencies hostage and force them to pay up. So a few notable examples just to cap this summary off. They've hit the US state governments like Florida and Georgia in 2018. They shut down the HSE government agency in the Republic of Ireland, which is a really high profile case. And the group, interestingly enough, even is known to have a condition in its ransomware to avoid systems using the Russian language, which to me kind of says it all about the targets and the origin. So with that said, we're going to be looking at another group here too, the Sandworm group. And when we talk about Wizard Spider, we think about profits, we think about making money through cybercrime. On the other hand, when we look at Sandworm, we're really looking at a destructive APT group that's just not focused on profits or keeping data at all. So Sandworm focuses on a class of malware called wiper malware, meaning the data is wiped, and paying the ransom is really trivial to them as they likely wiped your data regardless. And their goals here are to cause disruption, mayhem, and as you can see if you glance down at the notable attack list, there's a pretty clear target being focused on. They're also pretty industry agnostic, but they're a little more closely tied to the Russian government. So Sandworm goes by a few names, but they're known to be part of the Russian GRU. And I didn't know what the Russian GRU is, but it's essentially the Army intelligence branch. So they've worked on some high profile attacks, such as the current cyber attacks in Ukraine, taking down the Ukrainian electrical companies in 2015. And then they're also known for the infamous NotPetya attacks. So if you don't know about NotPetya, I really encourage you to do some deep diving into it. You could definitely kill an afternoon just reading or listening about NotPetya. It's a fascinating story with Sandworm modifying the original Petya ransomware malware and then using the Eternal Blue exploit on Windows operating systems. So NotPetya worked by basically encrypting the master files in your hard drive, forcing a restart of the system. And then when you rebooted, it would show the instructions to wire about, say, $300 worth of Bitcoin to an address, and then you would get your files unlocked. At the same time, though, the malware would be hunting for any local connections it could hop to and basically infect across any endpoints or workloads it could touch. And NotPetya really kind of came onto the scene when it expanded beyond its scope, and that's how it got a lot of its infamous stories around it. So I could really dive into NotPetya and other Sandworm malware for honestly like an hour, but I want to make sure we get into the fun stuff today with the live demo led by Amit. So Tyson, I'll hand it back to you before we get into that demo.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I just want to give a high-level overview of how the different ways that Uptycs is using the MITRE ATT&CK framework. First of all, on the back end, we have well over 1,000 different behavioral rules that are mapped to TTPs in the attack matrix. So these not only cover, the majority of them are covering traditional endpoints, but we're also looking at container attacks or attacks against Kubernetes or cloud infrastructure, because attack also has the enterprise matrix for cloud, the enterprise matrix for containers and so forth. And so, we have that data, we're analyzing that data. So we're using the attack framework to map our detections to those TTPs. The second way that we use the attack framework is we work it into our detection UI. And that's, you're gonna see a lot of that in what Amit is going to show in the demo. But basically we have a little, I wouldn't call it a thumbnail, but a little small representation of the attack matrix. And if it's lit up like a Christmas tree when looking at a detection, then the analyst should be able to easily understand that this detection is high severity. This detection deserves, priority. It should be escalated immediately, and it gives the analyst a sense of what the attacker might be trying to accomplish. And then the final way that we incorporate the framework is we provide a high-level dashboard showing all the different types of attack mapped activity in your environment. And that's like a really high level view that you might want to use like in a SOC monitor or a big monitor in the SOC. Yeah, so those are the different ways that we're using the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Before Amit goes into his demo, I did want to point out that the MITRE team, evaluation team, they were creative in their naming of users, hosts, and domains. So as he's going through the evaluations, try to just pick out some of those things. I'll tell you that for Wizard Spider, they had a Wizard of Oz theme. And then for Sandworm, the Sandworm evaluation, they had a Dune related theme. So see if you can find those Easter eggs.
Thanks, Tyson. Yeah, no, it's kind of fun to pick those out. They definitely had some fun with it when they were running the simulations and evaluations. But yeah, no, thank you so much for kind of starting us out with, okay, what is the background of MITRE ATT&CK? How can this year's evaluations be used? But kind of taking us on this journey now to how do we actually apply this in a day-to-day life? And I think it's easy to see through this slide, and then hopefully in a moment with what Amit's going to walk us through, how a variety of different roles for analysts or security teams can apply MITRE ATT&CK in their day-to-day work, and how we've tried to kind of weave it in naturally into the product. So thank you so much. And I'm really excited to hand it over to Amit now. Anything you want to say to kind of set the stage before we get into the live demo?
Thank you, Jeremy and Tyson. I would say, it was a very nice introduction to the MITRE ATT&CK framework and the threat actor groups, Sandworm and Wizard Spider. So let me share my screen and showcase the demos.
Sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and let you take over.
All right. So these demos that I'm showcasing here are actually basic from the actual MITRE simulations happened last year. As you can see, this detection is from 2021. So MITRE did the simulation last year, and then they published the results in the March this year, right? So on this detection, you can see that this is a 10 by 10 score detection, which is a high severity detection in Uptycs platform. 10 is the highest score that we give to any detection. On the left-hand side, you also see that we have MITRE attack matrix, and you also see the progression of the attack across the various techniques and tactics inside this thing. Now, here you see that we have 36 signals associated with this detection, in which we have 11 alerts and 25 events. Now, this is Uptycs' philosophy of detections, where we basically combine the suspicious and malicious alert as well as suspicious and benign events into inside the detections to provide full picture of the attack, or the kill chain of the attack inside a detection. On the if we click on the alerts, we see that there are a bunch of alerts that we have fired here. For example, the dsquery.exe execution detector is one alert. So attackers basically use the dsquery.exe to identify the domain controller inside the system. Now, typically what attackers will do is they will extract the passwords from this machine, and then they will use those passwords to move laterally inside the system. As we can see in this alerts, they extracted the password from the registry from this system. Right now, the second detection is basically task kill, which is we can see that attackers also try to kill some processes. In this case, it is mslog.exe. But apart from this, there is another very important detections that we see in this is Yara process memory, where we have detected aura-dump.exe as lasagne. Now, this is I would say one of the most powerful component inside the Uptycs EDR, where we detect the malicious things inside the memory. Now, we are using, like, Uptycs agent uses a highly efficient memory scan approach in order to apply the YARA rules, and then we scan the process memory, and then we detect the the known toolkits through this process. Now, this feature itself, we call it as contextual detection. And the purpose of contextual detection is basically to provide the analyst more context around the detections. Like in this case, you can see here that we have populated, providing this, the progression of attack on the MITRE ATT&CK techniques, but we have also populated the tool name that is being used inside these detections by the attackers. Now, the purpose of this contextual detection feature is to highlight the dangerous thing, or I would say the most important things inside the detection, so that analysts know exactly what is the severity of this detection. So all of these things that we do, like threat score as well as contextual detections, is basically an emphasis to give analysts some sort of indication that this is a high priority detection, and so that they can analyze that detection, or triage that detection in that way, right? So what really happens is, like, when an analyst is looking at this thing like lasagne, then they know, okay, there is some toolkit is used inside these detections, which is also used by multiple APT threat actors. So in some cases, the analyst might be aware about those toolkits, and in some cases they might not be, because the threat intelligence as it is coming, and our team is analyzing that and adding those, the YARA rules to detect those toolkits. So sometimes the analyst might not have an idea, okay, what exactly is lasagne, right? So if you click on this thing, what we have done is we have also provided the, the description, the capabilities, and basically a kind of profiling to that toolkit, so that the analyst can look at that and identify what exactly is the capabilities of the toolkit are. So in this case, we can see that this is a post-exploitation tool to recover the passwords from the system. So attackers basically deployed this toolkit onto the system to extract the passwords from the system, right? And then they will use these credentials to move laterally inside the network. We have also added the reference links here. So if the analysts want any additional information around that toolkit, then they can browse these links and get more information around that. Now, this is basically a textual representation of the attack as the attack is going and what type of activity is happening in MITRE attack framework and stuff. But if you look at the detection graph, then we also provide kind of graphical representation of the attack, right? Here we can see that the attack basically started from run DLL32, where attacker used this DLL, loaded this DLL inside the run DLL32 address space. And after that, they launched several commands like task kill, find str, dsquery. And then finally, they actually use the aura-dump.exe to extract the password, which is a lasagne, right? Tool, as we have identified through our YARA process memory scan. Now here, if you look at any of these nodes, we see a bunch of information around here. One of the feature that we have is basically you can scan, not scan, but you can search on VirusTotal. If you click on this this button, then this will take you to a VirusTotal link where you can see the open source intelligence reputation for this hash, if it is benign or malicious, right? And we also provide full context around that event, where you can get details about the PID, parent PID, and all SHA-256 as well as the complete history of the ancestor list, meaning the parent processes, and to identify like what is the root cause of all of these things, and as you can see on the process graph as well. So this is basically the the first detections that I wanted to showcase. Now I have second detections that I want to showcase, and as you can see here also, it is a 10 by 10.
Just one quick question. I know we talked about that process memory point, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of the utilization side of Yara scans, maybe a little bit about why we use Yara scans.
Oh yeah, basically, as I said, like contextual detection feature is a very powerful feature of our product. Now, there are a couple of decisions that we took when we were designing this component. One is that we wanted to use the Yara because Yara is something that everybody is familiar with inside the security community. It's kind of a Swiss Army knife. We as a defenders, we use it, and threat intelligence people, we use it day in, day out in order to hunt the threats, in order to detect the threats. So it means that the people already know about it. There is no education required in order to create or write those rules. So the other thing is because there is a if you scan the process memory, then it's going to be a performance intensive operation. It's not going to be easy. So what we have done is basically we have studied around thousands of malwares, and we have created all that data in order to understand what exactly we need to scan inside the process memory. So we are using that kind of approach in order to selectively take the memory regions and scan them through process, through Yara, rather than taking the entire process memory of the process. And that basically provide us a highly efficient memory scan in comparison to running, the scan onto the entire process memory. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. So this is the second detections that I want to showcase. Here also we see that it's a 10 by 10 detections, which means it's a high severity detections. And on the left-hand side, we see the progression of attack inside the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Here we also see that there are a bunch of techniques that we have detected inside the impact tactic. Now, this is like inhibit system recovery, which means that there might be some activity associated which inhibit the system recovery. Now here we see that, okay, there are a bunch of activity that is being done. We also see Ryuk here as a part of ransomware activity. But before we jump into that, I want to go down and see, like, before launching the ransomware, what exactly the attackers did on the system, right? So we can see in these detections that attackers basically use the PowerShell.exe in order to launch the attack and download like uxtheme.exe. Now uxtheme.exe is a back tool, and the attackers are using putting that back tool into the persistence, low one persistence, which means that it can survive the reboot of the system. And after that, attackers use the AD-find utility to extract the domain user groups and domain controller the configurations. So it's basically used by attackers to move laterally inside the system. Now in this case, they are trying to identify where is the domain controller, what are the users, and all these kind of things. They also use the VSSA admin utility to create the shadow copy. Now this is being done basically, as we can see, the next alert is to access the ntds.dit file. Now ntds.dit file on domain control stores the username and passwords, right? So they created, you cannot access that file just directly, because the operating systems will stop you doing that. So they created a shadow copy, and then using that backup, they basically try to extract that file from the system. Right. They also use the rag.exe to copy the same file, which again stores the username and password, and then they use basically net.exe to identify the other systems inside the network, and taskkill to delete, kill the system services or some antivirus processes and stuff like that. Now, after doing all of this activity, they actually use the VSSA admin utility in order to delete the shadow copies. Now, this is important before launching a ransomware attack, because this, this utility, if you delete the shadow copies, then you are basically not allowing the person to recover the files, because that's where the backup is, right? And if you delete the backup, then you cannot recover the files from the backup. And this is the first thing that the ransomware, the operators will do, because after encryption, the first logical step the person would take is basically to recover those files, right? The encrypted files. Now, if you delete the backup on using various methods like VSSA admin is one method, then it means that you are inhibiting the system recovery, and this is like one of the most important technique in MITRE attack framework. Now, after doing this, what they did is basically they launched the ransomware attack here in this case. Like they launched the Ryuk.exe, which is a ransomware. It was used by Wizard Spider. This detection is basically is a Wizard Spider simulation from MITRE. If we see like Ryuk.exe here, and then we see some encrypt switch in the command line, which basically is like encrypt the files. And we also see like notepad.exe here, which means that this detection is process injection detected, which means the Ryuk.exe is actually injecting the code inside notepad.exe. So once the code injection happens inside notepad.exe, then the actual encryption will happen from notepad.exe. It will not happen from Ryuk.exe because the code is injected inside notepad.exe. And this is a pretty, I would say it's common technique used by threat actors, because if you are a normal user and you look at it, okay, this is a notepad.exe, then you probably will feel like, okay, this is a benign, application because everybody uses notepad.exe. It might not be doing anything malicious, but the attackers inject their code inside these benign applications, like in this case, notepad.exe. Then, the entire malicious activity will be carried out through that process. Now, Uptycs provide a very granular detections on these type of activities, right? And we call it as advanced detections because they are coming directly from the agent in terms of, the lifting that we are doing there in order to detect these things. Here we can see that we have used create remote thread. The OS query is reporting that the attackers are using create remote thread at a code level API from Ryuk to inject code inside notepad.exe. And in the arguments, we can see that there is a target process, which is the notepad.exe, which is resonating with the command lines that are used by the attackers, right? And along with that, we also get, like you can hit this button, go to the virus total and see the open source intelligence. In this case, you also see that we have process allowed, means we have not really killed the process in this case. And you see the ancestral list also around this activity, right? So one thing is like, this is basically a detection simulation that was done by MITRE, but Uptycs also provide advanced capabilities like remediation, blocking, and everything in order to, so that if you have a remote workforce, then you can, you don't really have to, everybody's these days working from home. So you don't have to basically, go to the personal location or something like that. You can just, go and remediate those things directly from the console, right? Jeremy, over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amit. I think you did a great job kind of diving deeper into both of these threat groups and kind of showing us how to map out each of these detections using Yara. So some really exciting stuff there. Now is kind of the time for that open Q&A. I've seen a few questions come in, but definitely keep sending them in, and let us know if there's anything off the top of your head that you want to ask Amit or Tyson while we have them here.
Yeah, Jeremy, I wanted to ask Amit, as Amit, this is your team's second year of participating in the attack evaluations. Can you provide us with some just insight of what it's like to work with the attack evaluation team as a vendor?
Yes, Tyson. I mean, I would say that it's a very enjoyable experience. As a defender, I mean, we love the way that these guys do the simulation. This is, one of the best simulations in the industry you can get, that the depth of it in doing the simulation. Obviously, it is not really similar to the real activity that happens, but it can go as close as it is possible. And it's very thorough in its terms of evaluation for the EDR products, right? So in terms of the process, normally what really happens is like they send us the email, talking about the labs and then giving us all these ranges where we have to install the endpoint and configure our product for the simulation. And once that is done, then they basically provide some sort of presentation where they describe each step that they are going to execute. And it's kind of very friendly environment where they execute something and then they ask for the output, like whether we have detected or not. So it's a fun exercise, I would say.
That's awesome. And it looks like they had some fun too. Tyson, I was looking for those Easter eggs and I saw like I think the name of one of the servers was Dune. Maybe they have the author's name kind of scattered about as well. So definitely looks like a fun thing to be a part of as well. I'm seeing a couple questions have come in. Maybe one's more up your alley to start with, though. This one's kind of talking about we've covered a lot of kind of detection use cases, but asking more about the user analysis side of things. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about some of our identity solutions. Maybe a specific use case or like a password being compromised or something like that.
Yes, Jeremy. So what we have is basically we have a dedicated user analysis dashboard as well. Like in this detection, which I was showcasing in this demo, we saw in both of the detections, basically attacker extracted the password, they compromised the password, and then they use these credentials to move laterally inside the system, right? They might use RDP, they might use SSH to log in and move laterally inside the network. So what we have is a user analysis dashboard. Let's say if the Amit credentials are compromised, then I can go to that user analysis dashboard and I can track Amit's activity. Like, okay, in this time frame, Amit logged into this machine, and from this machine he logged into these machines, and what are the other activities are being done, like the commands that are being fired by me, or basically we provide a complete picture of the user activity as well as the login sessions that happen across the network.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that answers it really well. Tyson, how about this one for you? So what does Uptycs do in regards to investigations, such as investigating an incident?
Yes, great question. Because detection is really, part of what you need to do. And you might say it's only half the battle. The other half is after you determine that a detection is valid, then you need to answer questions about, okay, how big of a deal is this? And especially with increased, regulatory requirements for data breach reporting, this gets even more important. This capability, the ability to quickly determine the scope and severity of an incident, the blast radius, so to speak, is increasingly important. So in Uptycs, one of the Amit was showing the signal list, the detection graph in the detection UI, but there was another tab that he wasn't able to get into just because of time, which is pivot queries. So for each detection, the Uptycs platform will pre-build queries based on the host or network artifacts that are found in that detection. So they'll take things like users or hash file or file hashes or process IDs and pre-build queries such as like, where else is this user logged in, or where else are we seeing this process ID, or where else are we seeing this file hash in the environment? When was the first time? So we automatically pre-build these queries so that analysts kind of have a running start on their investigation. So if they see a detection, they say, yes, this is very likely to a legitimate incident. Now I have all these questions I want to answer. We anticipate those and pre-build the queries for them. As for other types of investigation, maybe Amit, I'll throw it back to you if you can talk about like threat hunting and some other things.
Yeah, sure, Tyson. I think we have, as a platform, we have very powerful investigation capabilities because we store the historical data as well, and you can do the real-time queries as well. So there are multiple places where we have added this investigation capability. Like pivots, as you said, is one thing where the detection is coming, then you can go to the pivots and then you can, know the exposure around your organization, if this hash or this IP address or domain that is inside the detection is basically, contacted by other systems inside the network or not. Right? The other thing that we have is something we call as threat hunting dashboard, which means if you have some lead, let's say it's a domain, IP, or hash, or maybe the queries, that you can write those things and then we will do everything for you. Basically, it will be like, kind of automated investigation where we'll show you the process graph will show you everything related to that incident or that particular indicator, how that typically the attack came, and then what are the, just like the detections graph that we are showing. Right? So apart from that, there is an investigation page also where you can write SQL queries and you can get any answer that you want based on so much data that we collect. On the threat hunting dashboard, I would say that you don't really have to use any SQL, or since our platform is based on SQL, you don't have to use any lengthy SQL queries. It is just the lead that is coming to you. Let's say it's a domain, IP, or hash. You just paste that, and then you'll get the entire context around that.
That's awesome, Amit. Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful piece. You don't have to learn some proprietary language. It's a relatively easy interface to use, and to be able to spin up these pivot queries and complex threat hunting dashboards. It's pretty minimal, SQL, almost no SQL knowledge that you need. So I think that's really great. I do want to be mindful of everyone's time on this call. So if you have any other questions, definitely feel free to keep putting them in the chat. We can keep answering over text, but if you have anything that you want to follow up on, please see my email down below. Amit, Tyson, and I, we love talking about security topics. We love talking about anything really relating to privacy, security, threat hunting. So definitely drop us a line. We're happy to chat offline, but I think for right now, Amit, Tyson, I'd love to hand it over to you for any final thoughts before we kind of close out the webinar. So Tyson, you want to go first?
Yeah. Again, it's MITRE ATT&CK framework is one of my favorite topics. People can quibble about it. They can find, ways that it can improve, and those are certainly valid. But we have to recognize that it is the only thing like it out there. And it's given the cybersecurity industry lingua franca, or a standardization around how we talk about attack behavior. And that's incredibly valuable. So we shouldn't lose sight of, the massive contributions that the MITRE ATT&CK team has added, to this. And what it does is it really gives us a way to start thinking, more deeply about some other issues. As you'll see, the Twitter conversation, around the attack framework, and some really great thought leaders out there. They're saying, well, based on what we're seeing here, what if we did this? And we're starting to see other things like the MITRE defend framework that kind of mirrors the attack framework and shows you, okay, what are the countermeasures that you as a defender need to put in place? So, I mean, I could go on, but I think it's a really exciting area, and very hopeful for the cybersecurity industry.
That's awesome. Amit, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, Jeremy, I would say that, as a defender, we always enjoy participating in the MITRE framework, the simulations that these guys do. And it's a very nice framework that they have created, because now it's kind of a standardization, right? So people understand now what exactly, what the threats are doing, what type of techniques are there, what type of tactics are there, right? So they have really nicely laid out that foundation. So you don't really need to be a very deep technical guy, just to understand that thing, right? So everybody basically is familiar with that. Okay, this is how the APT operates. This is how they carry out their stuff. So it's a very interesting framework, and it's a very as a defender, it's a very, as I said, like it's very good for us. Like we enjoy changing those things.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's fun to learn about, and they have so many good resources on their website. Thank you guys both again for joining us today. It was really great having you two both as co-hosts. You guys have so much knowledge on the product and kind of evangelizing this MITRE ATT&CK framework too. But yeah, thank you also to those of you who joined us on this call. That's all we have for you today. Definitely feel free to reach out if you have any follow-up questions. But yeah, enjoy your day, and yeah, we'll talk later. Thank you so much.
All right, thank